Hi, everyone. I want to welcome you to a new episode of the AM show. Today's guest needs no introduction. He actually likes to identify himself as Dave Hollis, the husband of Miss Rachel Hollis. But I'm going to let him introduce himself because it just sounds better when it comes from Dave.
Right on. Well, thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here. As you say, my name is Dave Hollis. I am, in fact, married to Rachel Hollis, and we are in business together, working at the Hollis Company, trying to create experiences and tools that will help people chase a bigger, better version of their life. I live in Austin, Texas, where we do this work together. We have 4 kids, which is like 1,000 kids, and have had the experience in this last year of scaling our company from what was about 4 or 5 people when we first got here in June of 2018 to now more than 50 people that are working here, trying to, as I say, work in live events, in books, in digital entertainment, in just kind of a host of things around this idea of tools space. I worked in entertainment for about 25 years before I came into doing this work with my wife, and am pursuing impact in a way that, as much as I had a very, very satisfying career before I got to the Hollis Company, I can say that I am chasing what will be the legacy that I hope to leave on this world in the work that we are doing right now.
Awesome. Okay, so for those of you who don't know who Rachel Hollis and Dave Hollis are, you need to go find their company, thehollisco.com, and find out a little bit more about them to put our entire interview into context. So I kind of want to start by talking about community. That is something that maybe that both you and Rachel have done really, really well. Maybe it was Rachel who started off by herself in the beginning, since you, as we know, had a job working with Disney. So touch on the aspect of building a community, how she did it, how it changed once you joined the picture, and how you're still continuing to build a strong community.
So you are correct. My wife built a community for a decade and a half worth of time in this business that she was operating prior to my having come on board. So I'm excited for everything that we're going to chase together as we continue to build this community. But it's very much a testament to her work, her listening, her really paying attention to the things that she could serve the audience well, and finding a way to deliver that value over and over and over again. She had a company that over time was a reflection of where she was as a person. And so her ability to connect with community was a reflection of what she was working through at that time in her life. So she started an events business, then she came into doing some blogging, then she started transitioning into some broader media work, and the tools and the things that she was working on at the time were aligned with where she was life stage wise. So a lot of the stuff in the earlier stages of this business were about giving people recipes for getting their kids to eat healthy, or how to create structure around a chaotic life as a working mom, or what to do with a kid when they come into a new phase in life. Those were the things she was experiencing and could speak with the most authority on. And so her thinking about community was about, how can I, with the things I know, deliver value to an audience in a way that helps them, if they're having the same kind of thing, better construct their day, better front load, better create a set of habits, whatever it might be. In the last 5 or 6 years, 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 years, she really transitioned into embracing developing herself. Growth for her has become the most important commodity in her life. Maybe not the most important, but one of the most important commodities. And so she has seen the benefit of really leaning into and pursuing growth. Her ability to take what she's learned and bring it back to an audience is the form of how value has shown up. When it comes to building community, the building piece has really just been a reflection of the value that she's been able to consistently deliver. And that value has just been about listening to what the audience wants. She wrote this book. It was the 5th book that she wrote in Girl Wash Your Face, but Girl Wash Your Face had the success that it did in part because she had spent as much time in community with this audience, hearing over and over the things that they were most consistently struggling with or working through when it came to stress and anxiety, when it came to the opinions of other people, when it came to how to process grief, when it came to any of the things. And so she wrote her perspective on the ways that these themes that the audience had represented had gotten in her way in her life. And because of it having been a reflection of their needs, it connected with them because it was her listening to and delivering value against the things that they were representing they needed help with the most. And so when it comes to building a community, whether it was how she approached it in the last 15 years or how we're approaching it now, it really comes back to listening to what the audience wants and finding ways to give value 10 times over before you ask someone to transact with you. Free value. We have podcasts and morning live streams and social posts and Facebook groups and all of these different ways that this community can interact with each other without having to spend $1, in a way that has us focusing, hopefully, on an every single day basis, how we can, and having heard something that they need, afford them value to solve a problem that will help them make their life better.
Fantastic. So do you ever feel like you're being repetitive with your content? I mean, do you ever feel like, gosh, how am I going to come up with something new? Or do you find that repeating, similar topics is more beneficial because people need to hear that same message over and over before it resonates?
It's a good question. I think for us, we tend to be, there are times when we are thinking thematically and how we're creating kind of an editorial calendar. It's less often than not. We're right now in the middle of a last 90 days challenge for our community where we are creating some weekly themes so that we can make our way through the last 12 weeks of the year, the last 12 weeks of the decade together. But for the most part, we tend to focus on creating content that feels authentic and is the thing that we're working through or feeling great about on an any given day basis. In real time, I'll be honest, we have both experienced the loss of someone in our family that was unexpected just 5 days ago. And the kind of content that we've created, because we're going to just kind of say it like it is, has been a reflection of us processing in real time the grief, the kind of reflection that comes in being faced with your own mortality, the appreciation for the blessing of life that you may have taken for granted before you got a phone call 4 days ago. And that wasn't necessarily planned. And there may be a time when, again, we come back to this message, but it is probably going to be more prompted out of the circumstance of something happening in our life than it is going to be feeling like we have to repeat it. That said, if you are a content creator and you're trying to get a message across to your potential audience, the community you're trying to build, a prospective customer, when you think that you have told them and you're worried about annoying them, they have not yet seen your message, period. Like if there was a lesson in how Girl Wash Your Face, it's almost sold 4 million copies. It's bananas and ridiculous. We talk about that book all the time. And there are inevitably always people who have not seen or have not bought or have not had an experience. Now, we're not beating them over the head with a message of buy this book. We're finding ways to take the value in the book and present it in a way that helps satisfy some of the need that the audience might have in a way that also leaves some breadcrumbs if they're interested in additional information to transact in, buying a book at the store. Or frankly, we tell people all the time, like, you want to listen to some free episodes? We've put some free episodes on the podcast. You want to listen to this book for free? Go to your public library. You can read it or listen to it for free. You want a free study guide? We created a 50-some page study guide. You can download it right now for free and take a deeper dive. A lot of times the things that have been most successful for us have required repeating the message, but because we're repackaging the message in ways that are always focused on value delivery, it doesn't feel like hitting them over the head with a call to action over and over. It's more, oh, wow, you found a different way to make a thing that is valuable valuable to me again, or if it's the first time that you're hearing it, maybe valuable for the first time because the form that you delivered it in previously was not met in a way that had it serving a need of the audience.
Right. That makes sense. That makes sense. And, you know, as you were talking, you mentioned friendships and having close friendships, especially in a time where you're going through grief. So how tight is your closest circle of business friends? Are those business friends the same circle of just friends when you don't even want to talk business and you just want to share personal stories? What does that tight network of people around you look like?
Good question. Because of how like crazy life has felt like it has been recently, we are admittedly very much homebodies when it comes to what are we going to do with our time when we are not on the road, when we're not at the office, when we're not leading this team or doing some work to try and deliver these tools. We have 4 kids, like I said, and so spending time with our kids. We have a house that's at the end of a cul-de-sac in the middle of freaking nowhere, and it's a retreat. And so a lot of the things that we like to do revolve around the kind of piece of this retreat that is our house. When we do hang out with friends, we aren't talking about work at all. And we have a very small, close-knit group of humans that we spend time with on like the social side of things. And there's an appreciation with them and anyone that ultimately comes into the circle that if we're going out, we're going to go out and have fun as humans that aren't people who write books or stand on stages, or that, you know, we are just going out to have a good time. Let's hang out and catch up on the awesome and crazy chaos that is raising humans, the like interesting nature of us working together. We have friends who also work together as husbands and wife, and the like dynamic of still wanting to make out with your partner is a thing that is a relatable thing. You can talk about some of that interpersonal stuff without it having to tip into getting too much into the business. Mm-hmm. When it comes to the business friends, our business friends have continued to change as our business has changed. And as we have continued to grow and the complexities of the things that we're challenged by continue to be bigger than where we were previously, we've had to continue to find people who could speak into their experience in having traversed similar things. And the people who can speak into it in, you know, here we are, October of 2019, are different, frankly, than people who could have spoken into it in October of 2018. Because there are some things that we are working on, or the ambition of our dreams, or the complexity of what it means to have a company that's as big as it is now relative to how big it was then, that require us to now sit at tables with people who have a little bit more advanced set of experience. And I mean, part of it is, I, from a business perspective, want to every single time sit at a table with people who have done things bigger than I have, that have done them for longer than I have, who have made more mistakes than I have, who, in having had those experiences, are willing to share where they stepped in it so that I can avoid stepping in it. And so that's required a really active pursuit of like finding a way to sit at tables with people who can, you know, can share. In that, though, you don't just get invited if you're going to be a leech taking from people, as we've had experiences of being more trailblazers than trail managers and trying to find a way to do something that maybe hasn't been done in a more conventional sense. When we crack something that feels like it's working in how we're delivering value to our audience, or how we're organizing our team, or how we're, you know, leading leaders, whatever it might be, our ability to bring our insights to that table is part of why we're invited to sit in that space. And so, if you want to, you know, like if you want to sit at a table with someone who's had more business experience or is doing something in your space that you aspire to ultimately do, you need to ask yourself, what of what you're doing, what of your unique life experience, what of the things that you currently have, you know, some trailblazing experience may be value added to you sitting at that table and talking about how you've done what you have, so that it's a give and take, so that there's an appetite for them sharing with you as much as hopefully you sharing with them.
That sounds good. So who would we be surprised to know is actually in your contacts or in Rachel's context, that maybe we're just thinking, wow, I had no idea that you guys knew each other, that you guys were, on that kind of basis.
The thing is, I don't know that there would be surprises necessarily, because we have been geeks about the amazing nature of being able to get to know some of the people that have now been generous enough to bless us with their time on our stages for our events. We're doing a business conference called Rise Business. It's happening here in 5 weeks worth of time in South Carolina, in Charleston. And every person that is on stage was basically a person that we were blessed to be in community with, who, when we asked if they'd be interested in joining us, attempting to teach some very practical, tactical things to small business owners or people building their career, they jumped at the chance. So Brendan Burchard, Marie Forleo, Ed Milet, Tom Bilyeu, Chris Hogan, Amy Porterfield, Dean Graziosi, Trent Shelton. I've said it feels a little bit like assembling a dream team from the old Olympic basketball days. It's like assembling an Avengers kind of a crew when it comes to having people who each have their specific disciplines come together. But that group, that crew has become the go-to when we run into a business problem that we haven't run into before. If it's specific to a discipline that one of them has expertise in, they've had a willingness to talk with us, and it goes both ways. If any of them is trying to figure out something and throwing a live event, or thinking about digital education with some coaching or whatever it might be, I am crazy focused on this notion of impact. Let's instead of focusing on how big your team can be, instead of how much money you can make, instead of what your title might end up being, if you focused exclusively on how much impact you could create because of how much value you can deliver, the rest of those things will come. And the idea of pursuing impact isn't then exclusive to impact that we can create here at the Hollis Company. The idea of impact is like a universal currency. And so if we, in figuring something out, can, to any of the people I just mentioned, share a little bit of what we figured out, and they can have more impact, the universe is better, the world is better, the possibility of people unlocking the potential that they've been given by the Creator is better. It's just it's a thing that I want to relentlessly pursue, in part because I think the more that you can give in that kind of way, the more that you're going to have it come back on you and to you. Like, any of these people getting any benefit from anything that we do will come back 3, 5, 10 times over on how they might bless our business with an insight to pursue something that we may have not thought was possible, figured was too hard, decided that maybe we don't have the competency or skill set for. I have sat in rooms with the people that I just mentioned, and they have convinced me to get past some block that I had about what we were actually capable for, in a way that turned my fixed mindset into a growth mindset in that capacity. And our business is blessed, and the people who've experienced the fruit of us pursuing that business have had their lives blessed by our ability to give them those tools.
Well, I think that's pretty impressive, basically building a company from scratch, getting to sit in a room with people that you maybe, I was going to say that you maybe never otherwise would have thought you would sit in a room with, but I don't know, from what I hear about Rachel, she envisions these dreams and then makes them happen. And so maybe this was something that she envisioned, this wasn't something that she thought was out of touch. This was something very much in alignment with what she was already dreaming up.
She's talked about it a lot of times. She has had this practice. I've adopted this practice. There's power in this practice. Writing your dreams in present tense as though they have already happened is a hack that, for your unconscious mind, has it believing that that thing already happens, and then works to make it so by connecting dots and leading you, whether it's consciously or unconsciously, on a pursuit to actually make it be. With Brendan Burchard, he is a friend. He's a good friend of ours now. And he was someone for years that she, on a piece of notebook paper, was writing down, I speak on Brendan Burchard's stage. She'd read High Performance Habits. She loved his other work. She was just really someone who was a mentor that did not yet know she existed or that we existed. And she wrote it down and she wrote it down and she wrote it down. She started sharing relentlessly the like wisdom that she was taking out of the book on social. And after a certain point in time, his team saw how often she was talking about it, connected the dots. There was an opportunity to do an event together before then she was ultimately standing on the stage, and the opportunity to do the commercial work opened the door for a personal relationship that has blessed us. It's been amazing. But if she hadn't been every day for literally, it was 2 years worth of time writing this thing down, I don't know that it would have occurred to her to hold the book up as often as she did online. She did it, I think, in part because her unconscious brain was trying to connect a dot that might afford this thing that she'd suggested was going to happen to actually come to be. And here, 3-5 years later, we are, like, he's family.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. I love stories like that, just because I feel like there are so many listeners out there. Well, and I'm sure, your listeners as well. They feel that dreams are just dreams. They don't feel like it's something that can actually be attained or that is actually possible within the realm in which they currently live. And so to get them to step outside of that realm is very, very difficult. But once they make that step, I think that it feels a little bit more practical and attainable and within their new realm.
Well, I will say, I totally agree. What I would say in the last year, where the company has grown as fast as it has, I've had to really push myself to grow personally to keep pace with the speed in which the company is growing. Mm-hmm. I am someone who was very much a fixed mindset oriented person, very practical and pragmatic, to my wife being a dreamer. And my pragmatism often had me focused a little too much on how things would happen instead of what the thing was. And my thinking that I couldn't or that we couldn't do certain things was really changed when I, on the personal side, started taking some time to put myself outside of my comfort zone, intentionally doing things that were way harder than I thought I could accomplish, so that in showing myself that I could, I changed what I thought I might be able to do in the future. And so if you're a person who is a big dreamer but afraid, if you're a person who thinks that there's just not that thing for you, I really want to encourage you to think about how you could find a way to push yourself into something that will challenge the way you think you can endure something physically. Like we did this crazy physical challenge of climbing a mountain for 35 consecutive hours to basically equal getting to the top of Mount Everest. It was excruciating and easily the most difficult physical thing that I've ever done. And in coming out of that experience, it wholesale completely changed the way I think about what I can physically do. And because it was challenging physically and required so much mental grit, so much mental perseverance to stick with and stay through a 35-minute grueling thing, it changed the way I think about what I can handle mentally and emotionally. So now when someone says, oh, this hard thing is coming, I'm like, come at me. Let's go, right? Because I went through this hard thing, and not only did I survive it, I thrived through it, and it changed the way I thought about what hard things do to me or how I can persevere through them. So whatever your version of trying something that you don't think you can do, go put yourself in that situation. And if you fail, fantastic. Oh my goodness, what a blessing to be able to put yourself into a position to fail so that you can learn from that failure. Mm-hmm. The sooner you can change the way that you would associate positivity or negativity to failure, the second you make it something that's positive, it'll fundamentally change the way that you can pursue everything in your business. If you don't have an appetite for failure, you will not grow your business.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's something that I wanted to ask about. Significant others that are resistant to change, are they really resistant, or is it like you just explained, that maybe they need to do something that's outside of their comfort zone? Which is it? Because it is so hard sometimes to bring people to the other side. And with someone as persistent as Rachel, I'm sure that you were pushed to the brink. And I just have to say this before I forget, that something that really resonated with me was an interview that I listened to between you and Rachel, where she basically said to you, like, listen, I'm listening to podcasts, I'm reading books, and 3 years from now, we are not going to be on the same page if you don't start doing that. And it didn't sound like it was an ultimatum, but it did sound like it was a way to give you perspective about where you're going to be and how you're going to feel 3 years from that time.
Oh yeah, that conversation was awesome. I joke, but it was actually an impossibly difficult conversation and the most important of our marriage. It's the thing that I think I value most in what we've created, which is accountability partners for each other. I, at that time, was struggling with being in a work environment that wasn't challenging me. I had stopped growing because of the benefit of really great teams and really great films that I was working on at the time at the Walt Disney Company. Not having to work as hard to get straight A grades was messing with me. I was crossing this weird bridge from 30 to 40 where I was asking some bigger existential questions about why I'd been placed on this earth and why, frankly, I wasn't in a position to have to use all of the potential that I'd been gifted. And she was just growing into the greatest version of herself. And the contrast between her growth and my stuck, or her growth and my sinking, was being exaggerated a little bit more every single day. And so she did finally have this conversation to me. And though it wasn't an ultimatum, it definitely was an unbelievable catalyst for me to take the first step towards closing this chasm that had, for a year and a half or 2 years, really just started to exist in our relationship. And that was, hey, I'm going to grow every day. And if you don't, will we still go on date nights 3 months from now? Will we still make out 1 year from now? Will we still be married 3 years from now? And spoiler alert, the answer was no, we won't be. And as much as I'd never really thought much about the idea of irreconcilable differences, I can see now what I couldn't then, that we were on a path towards irreconcilability. And it was important for me to hear the words from her mouth, which were, hey, I love you enough to wade into and have this hard conversation. I'm going to keep growing. I'm not going to hold myself back from becoming who I was placed on this planet to be because you're stuck. And man, I love you so much. I want more than anything for you to get unstuck, but I can't unstick you. You have to decide that this means enough to you, that this marriage means enough, that the father your kids deserve means enough, that you looking yourself in the mirror and being proud of who you are means enough. And it was a punch in the gut, but it was the first step of me deciding, you know what, forget this funk. I need to do the work to figure out why I'm stuck. And man, it started me on a discovery path of like really pushing against a bunch of the taboos I had around development in the first place. I really thought that people who were reaching for growth were doing so because in some way they were broken or not enough as they were. That like the idea of therapy was for people who weren't well, that people who read books or especially development books or listened to podcasts were in some ways not like manly men, and it just couldn't be further from the truth. And so that conversation ended up leading me to a path of really embracing therapy and really embracing conferences and really embracing books and podcasts to the place now where I appreciate that, yep, they're there as tools for people who get stuck, but they're also unbelievable tools for really whole and unbelievably healthy people who are just interested in pursuing being better every single day than they were the day before.
You left me kind of speechless.
Oh, come on now.
No, you didn't. But I come from a community where, a very strong Hispanic community where, yes, men are taught to be a certain way. They don't show their emotions. You don't talk about your emotions. You don't talk about a higher version of yourself. And females can sort of be that way too, but not as much as men. And so when you try to bring together a woman who is more likely open to that possibility and a man who is just completely resistant to it, um, you know, I wonder, how do you get them to meet in the middle and then bring him closer to her side than her going over to his side?
Well, I can only speak from my personal experience, but the thing that worked best for us was Rachel's unwillingness to slow down her growing into who she was placed on this planet to be. And the model of that pursuit was a rope that was thrown down to me inside of a ditch that I was able to cling to and pull myself up out of that place with, out and pulling her back down. She could have said, you know what, okay, I'll stop because this makes you uncomfortable. I'll stop because it's showing how much a difference there is between the two of us, or I'll stop and climb into this ditch with you. And then that way you can feel better about being stuck. And she'd have been stuck too. And I would not have had someone modeling what it looks like to receive the benefit of that fruit from developing, the fruit from those conferences, the fruit from the books. And I needed to, because there was this, again, this skepticism or stigma that I had on so many of the tools that she was using. I had to see the proof points that, oh, wait, you're doing these things and they're actually having this effect. If they're working for you, maybe they'll work for me. But she couldn't change me. And if you are listening and are in a relationship with someone who's struggling with the idea of growing, you can't change them either. But you can model what it might look like for them to embrace the tools that you use and grow from if you pursue that growth. She didn't do it in a way that in any way nagged me. I mean, I still was frustrated at times at the beginning by her wanting to get up at 5 a.m. when I did not want to get up at 5 a.m. But she didn't, she wasn't needling me. She wasn't making me feel guilty about it necessarily. She just decided to keep doing it. Mm-hmm. And that was enough to make me, it was again a little trail of breadcrumbs, start to follow what she was doing to see if maybe there was something in it for me that I might be the beneficiary of too.
Nice. Okay, well said. I kind of want to move into a topic that not a lot of people discuss, but that's really, really important. And that's kind of the legal issues surrounding building a business. So at the inception of this business, I'm sure that your legal needs were definitely different than what they are now. So can you kind of touch on how those legal needs have changed and maybe what they were and what they are?
Yeah. So at the beginning of doing this work, our legal stuff was really specific to intellectual property and how, if you create something, you can work to protect that creation. It was less about the legal entities of the business. It was less about the liability considerations. It was less about almost anything, because honestly, when the business was smaller, you don't know what you don't know. And as the business grew, what you realize is the things that you had, either resource-wise or structure-wise or protection-wise, were good for you then, but aren't good enough for you now. And so we had to find a way to sit with people who, again, had more experience with having grown companies from smaller to bigger, who had more experience doing work in the individual spaces that we were doing work, that could explain to us a little bit of the intricacies of what kind of legal things we actually needed, since often we didn't even know what we didn't know. And so we had to find somebody who had expertise in the live event space. We had to find someone who had expertise in the digital education space. We had to find someone who had expertise in the publishing space. And then finding those people who had those experiences, they gave us the list of, here's the stuff that, man, we really had to get a handle on. And here's the stuff that we thought we did, but we actually really didn't. These were things that weren't worth spending as much time on. And then we found somebody who could handle the diversity of the needs that we had. So we went from having an amazing, man, we had the most amazing IP attorney for a long time. And when we crossed a threshold to a place where our needs grew, it was a really hard thing to realize that, man, we're going to have to transition away from this person that we really, really like, because we need someone who has, one, just more people there are going to be times when the kind of ebbs and flows of our legal needs cross a threshold that would have allowed a smaller shop to handle the things that we have needs for. But two, we realized that we needed to have a diversity in how the depth of subject matter expertise in individual disciplines could help surround us with just every angle, as opposed to someone who's a little more traditionally practiced in a single kind of law. And so we ended up moving from a smaller shop to a bigger shop. And the things that we need legal help for now, I thought that I had a handle on what we needed legal help for now. I don't have a handle on what we need help for at all, because it has gone way beyond my understanding. And that's why you end up bringing somebody in who has that kind of expertise. I like it when they give it to me in layman's terms. I feel like I can sleep better at night when I know that the team has created the legal entity, has made the recommendations around reducing liability, has done any of those things. Mm-hmm. A lot of those things I didn't even realize were things I should be worrying about until I had the right group of people around me telling me why we needed to do X, Y, or Z.
Okay. So share like one of the most important things that you learned that you never would have known had you not had one of these subject matter experts.
Oh, goodness. I mean, there's so many little nuances in every deal that we do that I came out of having been a sales head at the Walt Disney Company and negotiated with, people in a way that I think I came in thinking that, well, that's the way you can negotiate with anyone, or that business generally works this way. So the terms that, govern a relationship will generally be like they were for me in the past. And that's crazy, because we have direct relationships. We have direct relationships that go through a distributor. We have direct relationships that are online. And each of them have a completely different kind of, there's just different rules. There's different, legal considerations that come into play with every single platform, whether it's a retailer or doing something online or doing something direct. And I think the mistake of thinking that the thing that worked in the past, or the thing that is the thing that will easily be applied to everything, it's crazy. That and when I was first here and we were a smaller company and I'd get a contract, I'd read the contract and I understand English, so I'd feel comfortable signing a document after I'd read it without having sent it over to a lawyer, because my practical brain was like, what could these lawyers possibly find? I'll be fine. It's okay. And that's like small thinking talk. Honestly, that's like scarcity mindset. You don't want to spend the $400 to have somebody like read a contract. It's crazy now that I think about it. And now I don't sign anything. I don't sign anything. I mean, I think I signed a Start Today journal the other day. I should have had the lawyer look at it, but I don't sign anything unless someone on the legal team has said, sign this document. Mm-hmm. Because if anything, like, we are just finally a year and a half into having jumped into this together, out of some of the things that we agreed to, that if only I'd had the right legal person giving me some insight on, I would have never agreed to every single detail in the term. I took boilerplate so often as the way that things had to be done, and never really pushed back on, oh yeah, by the way, we just don't do that here. Now, I mean, forget it. We redline everything. I mean, if you want to do, like, if someone wants to do business with us, if they're knocking on our door, it's going to be on our terms. We're going to still be reasonable and hopefully have it reflect the kind of value we can deliver back. But the idea of just signing a boilerplate document is crazy. There's no way I would do it now in a way that I did just a year and a half ago.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I think that you imparted a very important lesson in all that you said, even though you didn't use the words outright. It's definitely, as you grow, you probably need somebody who's a little bit more well-versed than you.
100%.
Yes. Okay. So the last thing I want to touch on before we end this podcast is How do you involve your kids in the business or in the philosophies of your business?
Well, there are so many things when it comes to like this idea of impact or this idea of value delivery that are applicable to them walking into their everyday. I mean, I've got a tattoo on my arm. It says ally. I believe the work we're doing is in part to come around this community and be an advocate for them and help them with tools that'll help them in a way that maybe they can't on their own help themselves. And I sit and have that same conversation with my kids as they're walking into school on a like first day of school or any day of school kind of basis. Like, it's your job to find the person who doesn't have the platform that you do, that doesn't speak up like you do, that doesn't have the access that you do, and grab them and bring them up alongside, advocate for them. And so I think there's a little bit of that. We are, like I said, in the midst of this last 90 days challenge, which is about creating habits and discipline around how you'd hope to show up the best for your life. And so we are, in the same way that we're encouraging this community to move your body for 30 minutes. I mean, I'm running like a crazy person right now, and I'm doing it not every day, but a lot of days. I am taking a kid out either on a bike or having them run in shoes on the roads with me, so that they also get a little bit of a habit loop around the power of pushing yourself physically, not in like a pursuit of weight, not in a pursuit of muscle, in a pursuit of just moving your body, so that when you do something that's a little bit physically challenging, you appreciate, one, that you can, and two, when you do, that it changes the way you think about what is possible in your life. You know, my wife, Rachel, had the second biggest selling book of the year last year, one of the biggest selling books of this year, and Girl Stop Apologizing. And for my boys and my daughter, they will never in their life question whether a woman can stand on a stage, have a #1 New York Times best-selling books, lead a meeting in a boardroom. Like, they, because of the work that we're doing and the model that their mother affords them, will hopefully be people who are always open to the reality that women are as ... as anyone else. And, you know, I mean, I've said many times, Rachel wrote this book, Girl Stop Apologizing. I hope Noah Hollis, who is my 2-year-old daughter, is never in a position to need to read that book, because she will have had modeled in our home a reality that Rachel Hollis is not going to apologize for being her awesome self. And I hope that Noah, I mean, Noah's a monster right now because she's 2, but she is already displaying that she has no interest in apologizing for who she was made to be. You know, so there's I mean, and I guess the last thing I would say is we did establish a foundation called the Hollis Foundation, where 10% of the company's profits are going to be, every time someone transacts with us and anything, put into this foundation. And the foundation's going to work to come around organizations that at the beginning are close to our heart, but that as we roll the foundation work out, be grant submitted reflections of what is important to the community, so that we can come around and support the needs of the community through 501(c)(3)s who are supporting specifically kids and kids in care. We were 4-time foster parents and have adopted a daughter, so kids in care is an important one for us. The military, whether you're active duty, a veteran, or a spouse partner to someone who is active duty or a veteran, and women, and specifically women coming out of crisis, if you know, coming out of addiction, out of homelessness, out of you know, anything when it comes to crisis. So involving our kids in the work that we'll do on the philanthropic or charity side of things is super, super important, because I want the legacy of the work we do here to be like the way that the people who've received the tools that we put in their hands, to like let them go change their world, but also because of their having supported our company, that we might be able to go out and help change some people in how we can rally around the charities that support them best. And I want my kids, like, what do you hope for your kids when you retire? I hope they want to take on the Hollis Foundation and distribute funds for the rest of their life because of how much we've been able to fund the foundation with.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's a very positive note to end this podcast on, us helping others, whether it's through this exchange of information or through how you're growing your company to in turn help communities. So I want to thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And tell people where they can find you, where they can find Rachel, your company, and the books that you mentioned.
Right on. So we, as I said, we work at the Hollis Company, which is thehollisco.com. You can follow either of us on social. She's Ms. Rachel Hollis. I'm Mr. Dave Hollis. And we do a weird live stream every single morning. It's called the Start Today Morning Show. Literally no one is talking about it, but at 8 a.m. Central every day and on iTunes and replay, you can hear us goofing and hopefully encouraging and motivating a little bit the pursuit of a great start to the day. Rachel has written 7 or 8 books now, but the 2 biggest, most recent are Girl Wash Your Face and Girl Stop Apologizing. They're available literally everywhere. And I've written a book. It doesn't come out until March, but it is available for pre-order right now. It's called Get Out of Your Own Way, A Skeptic's Guide to Growth and Fulfillment. And if you pre-order it now, you can listen to the first 30 minutes of that book today. And the only other thing I'm going to plug is that dang business conference, because if you are already listening to this podcast, you are the kind of person who could benefit from the greatest collection of business teachers in the history of the universe. Charleston, South Carolina, November 7th through 9th. It's called Rise Business. It's Brendan Bouchard, Ed Milet, Marie Forleo, Amy Porterfield, Trent Shelton, Tom Bilyeu, Chris Hogan. Forget it. It is going to be 3 days of fire. There's only a handful of tickets left. Go to thehollisco.com and check it out. I am done.
Fantastic. All right. Thanks again, Dave.
You got it. Have a fantastic weekend. Thanks for having me.